With it being a buyer's market in 2026, sellers are left on the sidelines wondering how are they going to sell their house most effectively. And that's what we're going to go over today.
Yes, there's a lot of things that sellers should do, and it's easy to get overwhelmed, but one of the priority things is price. So let's talk about that.
Well, before we get into that, can we get into something else before that?
Sure, yeah, why not?
They need to listen to their realtor. Because I'm having a lot of seller pushback right now. And it's a little I get it because they're so used to, 2020 to 2023, let's say. But
Yeah.
if you don't do certain steps in listing it, then you're going to pay the price later. So I'd say hire someone you really trust, knows what they're doing. And then if you do that, listen to them or at least take into account what they're asking you to do.
That's a really fair point because sometimes sellers are a little apprehensive, or the last time they sold a house was 10 or 20 years ago. Well, the way we use data, the way that clients or consumers are looking at data online is totally different than it was even 5, 10, 15 years ago. So
Well,
that's a very important point.
the other thing that I'm noticing is my buyers that are actually or sellers that are actually the worst are the ones that have bought in the last 2 or 3 years because they don't understand that this is a totally different market than when they bought. They're like, when I bought, I didn't do that. I would never, and it's like, yeah, but you bought in a seller's market. Now you're selling in a buyer's market. It is very, very different.
Yeah, so I suppose they were the ones waiving inspection, offering
Correct.
too much over ask, and
Yes.
now they're expecting to be on the receiving side of that as sellers now. So that
Yes.
is challenging.
Exactly. So I think so I wanted to preempt with that because I think that that's the biggest thing that they have to get out of their head is you have to understand that the market that you're in and you can still sell your house in this market and a lot of people are, but getting top dollar for your house in this market is very different than getting top dollar for your house in the market 3 years ago. And if you do what you did 3 years ago, you're not going to get top dollar for your house. You're going to get screwed out of money because you're not doing certain things that you need to do.
Yeah, which really brings us to price.
Yeah, which brings us now to price.
Yep, yep. So kind of yesterday's comparables are not today's buyers. Like if you look at something that sold even 2 months ago or 6 months ago, whatever is relative for your market, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your house is exactly going to sell for.
Right. Right. And the biggest thing that I'm seeing too is people that bought 2 or 3 years ago that are wanting to resell now, they are dead set on selling for the price that they bought it for. And I think that this is important. There are sellers that need to sell and there are sellers that would like to sell. And if you're a seller that would like to sell, you can price your house for whatever you want. Because if you're like, if this doesn't sell for 750, I'm not moving. I would totally take that listing. Like, sure, like let's list it. Let's see what we get.
Yeah.
And you're cool not moving. It's fine. A lot of sellers I'm dealing with are, I have an Airbnb that's not performing. I just relocated. I already bought another house and this is sitting vacant. This is what a lot of these tips are for those people that have to sell, not people that are like, I would like to sell, but I don't really care.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is true. And I think that, I've worked with sellers lately that they bought a house and they used a line of credit because they didn't, they wanted to make a competitive offer. And now they're sitting on that line of credit on their new house, but they're still paying the mortgage on the old house. So then that even becomes more of a piece where, hey, maybe we should have listened to our agent and priced a little bit more competitively or been a little bit more open to conversations about that. So price is really big when it comes to that, especially if you're going to carry two places.
Yeah, it's really important. And the thing is, back a few years ago, you could kind of price your home for whatever you wanted. And unless it was outrageous, you were going to get offers. And even if it was outrageous, you would get offers that were lower, right? Yeah. Now, if you price your place outrageously high, nobody comes to look at it. I mean, buyers have so many things to look at. So if your place is 50 grand more than all the places around it that are nicer or as nice, you're just not going to get people looking at your home.
Yeah. And I think that with all of the links and everything online, if there's buyers that are looking at a specific property, they're probably going to Google or search that property. They're going to see the pictures from when it was listed 2 years ago or 5 years ago, and they're going to be able to easily see like, oh yeah, they did a lot of work to it, or oh my gosh, they haven't touched it, they haven't put a dime into it, and they're asking 80 grand more, whatever the number is. And it either makes sense or they don't. So it's quite interesting when it does come to price because of all the data online today.
Well, and days on market is what's really shifted too, because, before Zillow, nobody really paid that much attention to days on market. You would drive by a house, you would be like, oh, wow, like that's a great house. I'm going to, call my realtor and see if I can see it. Now, nobody hardly drives past things anymore. It's almost all on Zillow for, from a buyer perspective. And they look at days on market, and those search categories, you search, you pick them, right? So a lot of times people go back 3 months, maybe 6 months. I mean, no more than a year. I mean, nobody goes back more than a year from a buyer's perspective. And that's how things are getting sold. You know what I mean? Like, people are looking at what's new. And if your house has been sitting a long time, not only are they wondering why it's not selling, but they're also not even going back long enough, a lot of them, to even see it. So that's like a really big thing you have to consider. Every day on market is fighting against you. So if you overprice and let it sit overpriced for 2 months, and then you want to price it to, a more realistic price, now you've been sitting and you're stale, and not everybody's seeing it. And people are seeing all these new listings that are popping up, and they get excited about those. So, and people
you don't
wonder.
Want to chase the market down. You do not want to chase the market down as a seller. That's a big no.
Yeah, and that's a big no. And the other thing you don't want to do with the price, and I see this all the time too, is people make these $1,000 price cuts. It's like it's been sitting on the market, and then we all get an alert that the price was cut, and you look and it's $1,000. That is not moving anybody's needle. Nobody was like, oh, wow, it was too high. But now I see that it's not. That's just, you want to cut ideally, you don't cut it all and you just price it correctly. But if you overpriced it, or you thought you priced it correctly and it's not selling, you need to price it aggressively enough that it's going to matter, depending on your price point. 5 grand, 10 grand, whatever it is. I've even seen 20, 30 grand. On a $600,000 house, like those are meaningful and those will move a needle. But these, like you said, you're like death of 1,000 cuts, right? It's like 1,000 here, 1,000 there, 5,000 here. And then as the buyer, all I'm seeing is price cut, price cut, price cut, price cut. And what do I think? Well, they're going to keep cutting the price.
What's wrong? What's wrong?
Yeah, what's wrong with it? But also, like, I'm just going to sit here and wait because they keep cutting the price little by little. Where if I see, oh, wow, this just got cut 10 grand.
We better jump on it.
We better jump on it. This is a really good deal, And so, and a lot of people get there through $5,000 and then $1,000 price cuts. So you may as well just, if it's not selling and you're not getting interest, you have to cut deep, and you don't want to have to cut that many times. You just want to sell the thing.
Yep. I think it is true. It's definitely true. And buyers are more so payment driven, not price driven. So they're looking at their budgets, and if you, let's just say, price something at $450, or in your market $650, but they can only afford $600. Well, they might not even want to look at that because your list price to sale price ratio are usually in the 90% to, over 100 if something goes over ask price. So if you're listing it too high, then you're not even going to get lookers in those price points, even though they're active and pre-approved buyers.
Yeah. No, I'm looking right now. And I mean, if something lists high, because I'm experienced, I still save it because I want to see how it goes down and all these different things. Yep. But if you're just the average buyer, you're blowing right by it. But I'm not going to go see it. Like, I'm not going to see something that's overpriced. Like, I'll wait for it to come down because I know it will. But I mean, I'm not, so you're really just shooting yourself in the foot there. But point number 2 is, so I'm getting some pushback on pricing. Like, that's a big one I'm getting pushback on. But a bigger pushback I'm getting is the inspection. Because, I'm trying to get all my sellers to do a pre-inspection. I want an inspection of their HVAC. I want an inspection of their plumbing. I want an inspection of their roof. I'm getting pushback because that costs a little bit of money, not a lot. It costs a little bit of money, a few $100s, and they don't want to pay it. But what I'm trying to explain to them, and it's working about half the time, is that the buyer now has leverage on the inspection. So when they bought 2 years ago and they waived the inspection, or there was a slew of issues, but they didn't ask for any money off because of those issues, that's because there was 7 other people behind you willing to buy that house. Now the buyer has control, and if they see issues, they're either skittish and going to back away, or they're going to say, okay, I want, $8,000 off the purchase price because of all these issues. And if you would have just had the inspection and disclosed them and maybe either fix them or at least disclose them, they don't have as much leverage with that.
Yep, because they made their offer and it's like, hey, we told you about this or we pointed out this. And so they can't use the inspection as just a, repair bill or an immediate price discount or we're walking away type of thing because everything was disclosed. They knew it ahead of time.
Yeah. And I'm even telling, if my sellers that are doing the inspections and we're filling out the seller disclosures with all the things from the inspection, I'm telling the offers we get, just so you know, we are not going to take off any money for anything that's on the inspection report. So please make your offer according to what is on the disclosure, right? And that really sets a precedent because you don't want to go under contract and fall out. You also don't want to go under contract and a buyer asks for 15 grand off, which I've seen because of the inspection report, because there's a bunch of stuff that you could have easily gotten cheaply fixed by a handyman, or they're real issues, but you could have calculated that into your listing price because things do pop up too. Like I had a girl recently, she had PB plumbing. We didn't know she had PB plumbing. It's a real issue. We had to take 10 grand off of the price of the home because she had PB plumbing. Like that's a real issue. You know what I mean? So real things can pop up that, but if we would have known that, we would have priced the home differently and maybe not had a 10 grand price difference, but maybe instead of 5, right? So there's things you could, so I don't know if you are, but I am wrestling with sellers to do these inspections, but they don't want to because they're like, I bought this place 2 years ago. The HVAC is fine. Not had any problems with it. There's no real problems in this house. I'm good, and that's fine. That's an okay stance to have. You just have to understand that your buyer's going to come back. That I've never seen a fully clean inspection report. I don't think there ever will be one. So you're going to come back with all the money they want off to fix the items, whether they fix them or not.
Yeah. And in our market, it's not super common to do a pre-inspection, but I do let sellers know that that's an option. The other thing that I see is helpful if that person bought a couple of years ago and they're now a seller, do they have copies of their inspection report? Because that's something that we can take that old inspection report from 2 years ago and then the seller has made notations on it, repaired this, replaced this, this is still the same. Then at least it's all known without paying for a new report. So that's sort of the happy medium that we see in our area because sometimes buyers are like, well, did that seller pay off that inspector to cover something up? Like you get this like skeptical side of buyers where it's like, okay, I get it. They're maybe going to want their own report, but at least here's what we have.
Yeah. And I think I like that too. The issue too that I'm seeing is, a lot of buyers waived inspections. And if you waived an inspection, A, that's not happening again now. And B, you have no clue what's going on in that house. Like this girl had lived in this house for 20 years and never had one issue with the PB plumbing, like never a leak, never anything. Didn't even know she had it. And then it comes back on an inspection, And so there could be something that's lurking, in the distance that, that's going to make your deal fall out. And honestly, she's lucky the deal didn't fall through. I mean, that's how, some of this stuff can be, right? Like you can get buyers are skittish. So you can get a buyer that's like, oh, heck no. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not dealing with that. And so, your deal can fall out. And then when your deal falls out, that affects your days on market because you were probably under contract for 10 days and nobody else could buy it. Plus, what I see a lot when you go under contract is people that are interested, inexperienced people, which most buyers are. Oh, that house is gone. Doop. You know what I mean? Unsave, unfollow, whatever. And they don't really re-see it pop back up as listed again. Or if they do, they think, oh, there's something horrendously wrong with it because, so you don't want that to be your situation. That's why it's so important that you figure this stuff out.
The stigma is real of a house going off the market and back on. Even if, a buyer's job falls through and they cancel, that house is back on the market for no fault of the house. Even if it was priced competitively and went under contract on day 1 and it goes back on the market day 5, people have already written that off in their mind.
Yeah. So people are skittish.
So, Oh, yep.
Especially that first time buyer market, those first time buyer houses. I mean, they are like, nope, it has been under contract and fell out, and I want nothing to do with that. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And it's like, I try to really work with my buyers to be like, no, we got to like revisit this and see, but
Yeah.
sometimes you just can't, and they're also on to the next, right? And so I think it's important, you at least should have big things looked at. You should at least have your HVAC system looked at. Like, do you tell people to do that where you're at? Just like a simple,
or provide service records or anything of that nature. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Like, if you have it serviced, every year, that should be fine. But a lot of people, they don't look at it until there's a problem, and there hasn't been a problem in 3 or 5 years. So they don't. But what happens is like, the air conditioner needed a $400 fix that the inspector noticed. So now they send their own HVAC people out that you don't know, that are salespeople that say, oh, actually, like you need a whole new unit, And so now you have this problem when if, you can show your buyer, listen, my HVAC people were out last month. My plumber was out last month. My roofer was out. Here's all the reports. Then because they don't want to pay for the inspection either. Like there's this weird thing where like, you don't want to pay the HVAC guy to come out. Well, guess what? Neither do they. But they will to try to get money off. But if you're like, hey, here's my perfect report from a month ago, or there was this little issue and I fixed it, and here's the proof I fixed it, they don't want to pay $150 to send a guy out to tell them it's fine. So they don't, because you did. And so like somebody's got to pay for it. And it really is in the seller's best interest to be the one, because you control the person. You have an HVAC guy you trust. You have a roofer you trust. You have a plumber you trust. These people, they're just hiring some guy they called who's like, oh, this is great. It's like a payday. They know that in escrow that the buyer's not paying and that the seller is. And that a lot of times they get what they, want, right? So like, let's be honest, it's better to use your own people.
Yeah. And the other thing is time. Like if somebody's being hired by a buyer and they know that it's a time crunch, then it's like, oh, let's add on a couple more $100 because we can go there tomorrow and fit it in, versus the seller calling their person that's been tried and true, that knows the system and the unit specifically. Way better, way better. So it's always good as a buyer to get a list of those service providers from a seller if you do put a deal together.
Yep. I just had a condo seller and they didn't want to, have anybody come out, whatever, it was fine. Well, so the HVAC came out and they said, you need a new pan in your HVAC. No big deal normally, but because this is a pancake unit, I learned way more than I want to about HVAC, but in condos, a lot of times there's pancake units. You can't replace a rusty pan in a pancake unit. So you have to replace the whole $1,500 part of the air conditioner. Okay.
Oh, wow.
If my client would have had our HVAC guy come out that we always use, because when I messaged him, he said the pan wasn't a big deal and this was so silly and you didn't really even need to do anything with it. But if we would have had that report, they would have never sent their own guy to look at it, most likely. Right. And so you're just hedging. And you know how much it is for my HVAC guy to come out? $100. I don't know what it is for most people, but it's $100. It's like the money is well spent.
Yeah. Especially in the long run. It's like time is money too. So it saves you time, saves you back and forth negotiating, like all the things. Just be proactive. And it goes so far.
Yeah, it really does. So that's a big one. For me, that's the one I keep harping on. In fact, right after we shoot this, I'm headed over to a listing. I'm going to have this conversation for the second time with him because I already had it and he kind of blew me off. And I'm going to say, listen, can we at least get an HVAC person out here, please? Because in Arizona, obviously, we have a lot of issues with HVAC systems, with all the heat we experience and all that. So they're a little more, likely to have something wrong. But so let's move to number 3, which is being flexible on terms.
Yeah. One thing I always tell my buyers when they're putting together an offer is, okay, price is one thing, but we got to talk about all of the terms. Closing timeline, inspections, yes or no, which, most of the cases, yes. All of the factors that go into an offer besides price that makes your offer super competitive or stand up above the rest. So if 2 offers come in, they're both the same price, but one has, way better terms, then that seller's going to look at yours more favorably.
The other thing that I'm really on my radar right now is assumable loans. So
Yeah.
FHA and VA loans are assumable. A VA loan can be assumed by a normal person, doesn't have to be a veteran. A lot of people don't know that. So your realtor, if you have an FHA or VA loan, should be marketing that it is assumable, and you should be open to that because that's going to help you get a better price, assuming that you have a low interest rate. If you buy like in the last 2 years, you might not have a low interest rate. But if you bought, 2020 through 2023, that can be a huge asset for you. And that should be part of your plan when it comes to, but a lot of sellers I don't want them assuming my loan. And that's weirds me out. It makes me uncomfortable. And if you have an inexperienced realtor with that, they might tell you it's not a good idea. But I can tell you it's a great asset. If you have an assumable loan, you need to be marketing the heck out of the fact that you're open to that.
Yeah. And I think good realtors ask those questions. And one, it's not a hiccup, but concern is if you have an assumable loan, there's going to be a gap between the purchase amount and the loan amount. So maybe you're getting a second for that difference, or maybe you're bringing cash from a different sale to that. But if that seller is open-minded to those scenarios, they can oftentimes reach a higher sale price or be appealing to more buyers because they can be more flexible.
Yeah, and I think some sellers, they're in their own head. Like nobody's going to have 150 grand to bring to this, to then close it or whatever, right? There's a lot of investors out there with a lot of cash, and they're looking for some kind of assumable loan. So that is something that front and center, you should understand that you have an asset there, and that's only going to help your sales price. You can actually ask for more than the market demands if you have a 3% assumable loan on it.
Yeah, because the payment's far less than even a lower purchase price, but a higher interest rate. So if they're solving for X as far as their payment, you have an asset, like you said, to sell.
Yep.
And whether it's an investor looking for a great investment, or sometimes, mom and dad or grandpa and grandma want to help, daughter or granddaughter or whatever buy a house, then maybe they're putting down that money or covering the gap in order for them to be able to afford that payment. So yeah, it's just interesting to see all of the different situations or scenarios that can come up as a seller.
Yeah, and I think sellers a lot of times they I know that my parents kind of do this sometimes. They get anxiety and they get in their own way. Like, oh, this person wants to buy it from me and then they want to rent it back for 3 months. They could destroy the place. Like they just really think worst case scenario, where if you have a buyer that wants to rent, wants you to stay there and then rent, it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? I just think that so many times, that can be a problem because they get in their own head, like they don't understand, I just had a sale where there was 3 buyers, and my client, why is there 3 buyers? That doesn't make it. And it's just let them do their thing. You don't need to overanalyze. You can't be super picky right now with who buys your house. You just have to let it happen, as long as they're pre-approved and they're putting a big enough down payment that you're comfortable with. You just can't get in your own way. And I think sellers, your right to be picky right now is just not on the table. Or if they want to do a long close, if they want to do a 60-day close, I wouldn't scoff at that at all. But a lot of sellers no, I want a quick close. It's well, how long is it going to sit before you get your quick close? It could sit more than 60 days. So as long as people are putting up hard money and, just let them do a longer close.
Yeah, for sure. And so if a seller, let's just say a seller gets multiple offers on a property because they priced it right, they listened to their realtor, and they position themselves in the market properly. What I'll do if I'm presenting multiple offers is I will leave the names out of it. So it's if, let's just say one's, a person and the other one's an entity or something like that. It takes the emotion out of it for a minute, and we go through all of the terms, and then I ask them which one they think is better. They usually are leaning towards one or the other. And then it's okay, well, this offer was made by, XYZ. This offer was made by XYZ. And it just sometimes makes a difference because people are like, wow, I don't want a LLC to buy it. It's like, do you really care?
I know. I
You
had
just said
that.
you like that offer better because it's better terms, you
I
know?
had that happen to me one time. I offered, and the lady was like, did not want to sell it to an investor. So she was like, I've offered full price. So I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting a response. And finally, the realtor let me know, like, she took another offer and it was less, but it was just because she really didn't want to sell it to an investor. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, that's fine. Like, and those things do happen. But in this market as a seller, that was when it was a little tighter and she did have two
Yeah.
offers, but you can't really be that picky and you have to really look at who's going to be the best offer for you.
Yeah,
Like what is
for
the
sure.
best offer for you? Now,
Yeah.
I want to talk about a selling plan because a selling plan is something that you did not need in 2020. Selling plan was just list it for what you want and we'll figure out a way to decide the offers. But
Yeah.
2025 or 2026's selling plan is a lot different. So how do you
Yeah.
address that with people?
I like to set expectations up front. So if let's just say, for example, I have a seller that wants to list too high, then I'm going to say, okay, let's pre-agree to a price reduction then. If you think that we're priced right, on day 5, if we've had no showings, we're automatically reducing the price. Or I will send them metrics of their views and their interactions or how many clients have like favorited or saved their property. We're literally watching all of these things, very detailed early on so we can gauge the activity of it, which is super important.
Yeah, that is really important. And I do like, if your days on market are so important now. So if you're not
Yeah.
getting any movement, you really, as a seller, if you need to sell, need to be open to lowering the price sooner than later. It's going to be more
Yeah.
effective sooner than later.
Yeah. It is. And, I don't know what it's like in your market, but 3 to 4 weeks on the market starts to become almost a stale listing where, when I started 13 years ago, we used to prep sellers like, hey, average marketing times about 5 to 6 months. Sometimes they sell faster, sometimes it was a year. And now here we are in today's world. It's like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, unless it's like a very specific or unique property. 4 to 6 weeks, we should have this thing under contract, unless there's something, like I say, very specific or unique where we're searching for like a unique buyer. So,
Yeah, and I even tell, that's what I tell my sellers is like, if we're not getting showing, like some sellers are very like married to the price that they want to get. And if that's the case, that's fine. But just know if it sits more than 6 weeks, we're going to have to cut deep to make it appealing, right?
yeah,
And so, I'm kind of good letting it sit a month and seeing, but like if we haven't got any showings in a week, that's a huge red flag. Like your first week, you
yeah,
should be having the most showings that you're going to have. So
yeah,
if there's no showings, then that's definitely concerning and you need to lower. If you're having showings and you haven't had any offers, I'm kind of okay with that for 3 or 4 weeks, kind of let people shuffle in and out because you only need one person. But after
yeah,
3 or 4 weeks, if we've had no offers or the offers we had are significantly lower than the price, then we need to talk about cutting the price and cutting it to not a little bit, not like, $1,000, like cutting it to what the market price really is. And then, or maybe
yeah,
the slightest bit above that, and then see, are we getting showings? Are we getting offers? But, your
yeah,
first week on market is so important because it's when all the traffic is going to come through. And if all those people come to look at it and nobody makes an offer, something's off. And if nobody comes to look at it, something's off. So you really need to be analyzing that. And I always like
yeah,
to get feedback too. Like I get feedback if I can from every showing I have. So, and a lot of
yep,
times, it's the price, but there's other things that you can kind of switch, and make more appealing with the setup or the layout or whatever. But the truth is a lot of times it does come down to price.
yeah. And I think as far as having a selling plan, one thing I talk about with sellers, let's just say they reach out to you 3 months ahead of time and ask for a price. It's like, okay, right now, here's what I'm seeing. But in 3 months from now, when you want to go active, we're going to look at all of the homes at that exact time. And if there's one that's like really identical to yours that's for sale, we're going to undercut it by a little bit, to make it, you're positioning that listing within the market where it needs to be. So if I recommended a list price of 260 to 275, and there's several other listings at 275 right now, then I'm going to say, hey, let's go at 270. Ours looks 10 times better than that, and that's where we should be anyways. But then if somebody's searching, that listing shows up more competitively than the other ones.
Yeah, and people don't like to admit, like sometimes I think sellers, they get so emotional, they take common sense out of it, right? I want to look at what's closed recently, last 3 months. That's always something we take into account. But more importantly, I want to see what's for sale and what's not selling. So if there's a house that is nicer than yours for $730 and it has been sitting for 30 days and it's not selling, if you come in and you list yours for $750 and yours is not as nice, why do you think somebody's going to buy your house? You know what I mean? So you have to look at it and say, okay, this house is $730. Like what is my competition? Like what, we do this in condos a lot because it's so easy. Because it's like, okay, a condo building has 3 layouts and it's in the same building and these are all the prices. And, it's just really easy to say that on a condo. But a housing market's not that different. There's more variation, but a lot of these cookie cutter homes are a lot of the same. And as the buyer, there's not that many buyers out there. So you need for them to say, this is the house, right? And a lot of that is going to be determined by this is the price. And it's funny because I have this couple, they're from Ukraine and they're fairly, they've been here like 10 years, but they're first time home buyers. And the guy asked me, he goes, we go look at all these houses. He goes, why is this one not as nice, but it's the most expensive? And so he was really confused, because he's like, this was probably on the lower tier of all the ones we've looked at today, yet it's the most expensive. And I said, Vlad, people can price it for whatever they want. Like they have full autonomy on pricing it for what they want. So you're right. This house would not be the house we would buy because it was the most expensive and on the lower end of nice of all the ones we looked at. But I love how simply he put it. Like why, and so it was like, yeah, exactly. Like you have to be realistic with everything else listed where yours fits into that. Because if a buyer is looking, they want the nicest house for the lowest price, period.
Yeah. And I think one thing to remember is silence is feedback. If there's a lack of showing or no great feedback that you're getting, or the feedback is either non-existent or lacking, that is telling you something, even if it's not what you want to hear. So gauging the market, the activity, and the feedback is just super important, especially early on, just focusing on that, because like we've talked, the days on the market is just crucial, especially in the market that we're in right now.
Yep. Silence is totally feedback. And so is, lack of offers and all the different things we covered. And I just think that it's so important for people to, wrap their head around it. Now, the last one is negotiation is back. And I think a lot of sellers don't like that, obviously, and they're resistant to it. But you have to understand, at least in the Phoenix market, if unless you list your property aggressively, you are not going to get a full price offer. It could be 10 off, it could be 5 off, it could be 3 off, but it's going to be off.
Yeah. And I think that's something to keep in mind as a seller. It's not just, hey, here's 2 offers, let's pick from them. We might be waiting a week or 2 weeks to get an offer, and it might take some back and forth. In my earlier years in real estate, not to sound like an old person, but we would counteroffer back and forth 5 or 6 times, and that was normal. Like we just haven't seen that in the last couple of years, but that's back. And maybe 5 or 6 times is a lot, but 2 or 3 times, you should expect that as a seller. And if it doesn't go that way, then that's a good thing if everybody agrees on the first try or the first offer. But expect to go back and forth, expect to have some sticking points. It's not a take an offer and run type of scenario anymore.
Yeah, there's 2 negotiations. There's a negotiation on the initial offer, and then there's a negotiation on the inspection, and you should expect to have both. And if you don't have both, then that's unusual in this market. And also, don't get offended. Like I've had sellers like, they just offered me $30,000 less. Like, I don't even want to respond. It's like, no, respond with your, they want 30. Will you give them 10? Let's respond with 10. Maybe they come back with two below that. And then because, I had a buyer, or I'm sorry, a seller, and it was like, we got an offer that was 30 below, and he said, no way. And I said, let's counter. So he countered to 10, but he's like, this is my total best, absolute bottom line price. Well, guess what? We got an offer from the buyer, $2,000 below that. And I said, listen, is it? Because we have a buyer here for $2,000, and certainly he took it, right? And so you can sit. So you always want to counter because you don't know where you're going to end up, and that's how I am on the buy side too. It's like offer whatever and make them counter. Like because it all is a negotiation. And sellers, especially if you bought in the last couple of years, you were like, oh, everyone just takes whatever, and this is my price. It's like if you were dead set on selling your house for $550, do not list it for $550. If $550 is the lowest you will take, please do not list it for $550 because you are not going to get that. List it for $565 and then take a deal for $550. And if you're like, if it's way overpriced at $550, then you're just not going to be able to sell it for $550. I mean, I don't know what to tell people sometimes when it's like, I bought it for $550 2 years ago. I have to sell it for $550. I do not want to lose any money. But the market, when I'm looking at comps, is like $520. Like I just don't, we can try. I mean, I'm always willing to try, but you can't get frustrated with me if it doesn't sell for above market value in this market. And that's what people have to wrap their head around. Because there's something, as a realtor, I don't care what BS spiel your realtor gives you. Everybody looks on Zillow. Everybody compares all the houses. It's super easy for them to do now. So I can't do anything until you get an offer. When you get an offer or we get a showing, I can try to sell it. I'm really good at negotiating back and forth. I can try to figure out the pain points of the buyer to try to make it the best deal for you. But I can't make you get an offer. I can't, posting on an Instagram or, like everybody's looking at Zillow. And anytime a realtor is telling you they do all of this marketing, like, there's some things you can do that are nice. But at the end of the day, all your buyers are looking on Zillow. They're all comparing. They're all sending us listings that they like. And so you can't beat that system. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And, if you as a seller get a low offer, it baffles me if a seller doesn't want to counter offer because it's like, okay, yes, you can reject it or, not respond. But what does that gain you? Even if you counter offer at, something very close to list price, then at least it shows that you're willing to play ball. And I always remind my sellers, hey, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. If you were a buyer, you would offer low too to see what the seller would do. Let's play ball. Let's keep the conversation going. An offer in hand is better than something that's just verbal or nothing at all. So
exactly. And I always look at it too, is it's such an emotional for both parties. Like the sellers are emotional, the buyers are emotional, and people get offended so easily. So if you're a seller and you're like, I'm not even responding to this. Nope. The buyers are irritated. They're like, screw you. And they move on. If you respond with a high offer, it's like also that FOMO feeling. Like the buyers are emotionally invested in buying this house. They love this house. They're debating if they should buy it in a lot of cases. And if you come back a little bit lower and you're starting to they get excited, just like my seller saying, I'm not taking a dime below 10 grand off. Well, he took 12, right? And so a buyer could say that too. We're not coming up any more than $10,000. And then you're like, yeah, but what about 15? And then they're like, well, it's only $5,000 and we really love this house. So there's just all this emotion that goes into it, and you really, as a seller, I know sellers hate this, but if you're a seller that needs to sell, you're at the disadvantage right now, period, point blank, end of story. You're not getting multiple offers unless you list it at a really good price. So you have to kind of play ball a little bit with this buyer, and you don't want to upset them. You want them to buy your house. Now you want to get the price you want, but there's just this game of like, don't be arrogant because you're not in the position to be arrogant right now.
Yeah. And there is a strategy, and granted it's a risk, but I wonder what you think of this. So there's a strategy where let's just say we know a house is worth $200,000 all day long. And the seller, let's just say they want to list it at 210, but there's agents that'll say, hey, let's list it at 190. We know there's lots of buyers at this price point. We're going to get into a bidding war and you'll end up with over 200 for sure. Like, it's like, okay, that's kind of a risk. It is a strategy, and some agents will do that. I have mixed feelings on it depending on the situation of the seller. Like, yes, we've done it, but
It's a
it's not a
risk.
guarantee.
It's a risk.
So it is a risk.
So it's a risk. So it's funny you brought that up because I just had one of my sellers that we just went under contract consider doing that. She threw it out there to me. Like, what if we listed it low? And I said, well, you're right. That can work out. Like, you can get multiple offers and we can bump it up possibly over what we're asking for now.
Yeah.
The problem is what if you don't get multiple offers? Like, what if you don't get multiple offers? You get one offer, they offer you the full purchase price, but now you're unhappy. And because, you listed it low and now you
get more.
And now you tell the buyer, actually, I'm not going to sell it for you unless you pay me 20 grand more. And the buyer, now offended, is like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. And they walk away. Yep. So if the question is, because actually this happened to friends of mine in Nashville. So they made a full price cash offer on a house and the seller told them that was their plan. They got one offer and it was on the first day. So he said, actually, I want it this much. I don't want to, even though you just gave me a full price cash offer, I don't want to do it. Well, they're like, heck no. Like, they could have afforded it, but they're like, no. And they walk out, right? He hasn't sold it still. It's been like a year. Okay.
Wow.
And he's lowered the price now, lower than what they wanted to sell it to sell it for, right? Because he didn't get all the interest that he thought he was going to get. My friends, I know them, I know their bank account, would have bought the house for what he wanted. They would have made the same full cash price offer for the offer. Because for them, it wasn't about the price. It was about the house and location. They've been looking a long time. However, he pissed them off, as you would be pissed off as a buyer if you were offering full price. And then they're like, actually, no, I want more. And you're like, what? I'm giving you your full price. So my point is it works if you attract multiple offers and then there's a bidding war. It can blow up in your face if it's not the case. So the only way I would do that with a seller would be if they were okay with selling it for the price we listed it at. Like, as long as you're okay if it sells for this. Like, if we get one offer and it sells for this and you're good with it, like, it doesn't work out, fine. Or they're not in a hurry to sell. So they're like, well, if that happens, then let's just delist the whole thing, scrap it, and try again in 3 or 6 months at a higher price point, right? But if you're a normal seller that's like, I would like my house to sell quickly, it's vacant, I need to move, whatever, I don't recommend. It's a high risk, and I think that sellers would get pissed at me if it didn't work out. So I would really have to tell them that it's a risk. And with a seller that, I was talking to in Phoenix, like, she didn't end up doing it because that's essentially what I told her. Like, this might not work out. Like, I know your mom said that this is what you should do, and maybe it would have. Maybe she would have got more money, but it's a risk.
Yeah, it is a risk. And it's like, if somebody's making an offer to you on day one or week one, they're a serious buyer. Do you really want to tell them to hit the dusty trail and go down to the next listing if they're really interested in yours, enough so that they took the time and crafted a thoughtful offer with terms and the whole shebang to send to you as a seller for consideration? So it's really interesting, and it's hard to say if something hasn't been on the market for a while, but I just had a seller and they listed at $525 and they got an offer for $460, and they knew $525 was a stretch. Like, we talked about it, but the $460 offer was literally like no cash, no inspection, like easy right out the door. Well, it didn't sell. They didn't take the $460 offer, and here they're now still on the market at like $470 something and still sitting there. It's like couple more months on the market that would have made the difference, but we're still sitting. So,
well, and that's something else that you bring up that's like interesting too, is like, so for this house I was just talking about, we got an offer in like 4 days of it being listed. So immediately the seller thinks, did I list it too low? Because we have an offer, it's already under contract. And what I tried to explain to her is, your buyers in the first few days that you list are your most serious buyers, because they have been looking, they call their agent, they say, this is the house, like, we have to drop everything tomorrow and go look at it because I don't want it to get sold out from under me, right? And so So as the time goes on, it's less and less serious buyers and more looky-loos. Like, like I'll take someone to go see 15 houses, let's say in a weekend, and they are not interested in any of them. We're just trying to get a feel for the area and what they want and all these different things, right? So all these houses are on that stretch where when your house just lists, unless you just happen to fall right in that, that tour, you're like, this is the house. Like, I want to go see this house. So don't get so wrapped up in it sold right away, because your showings are going to go down over the weeks. The interest of your showings are going to go down. Like if somebody tells me I have clients do this. They send me, I want to go see this house. I'm like, do you want to go tomorrow? No, I think like next Thursday, like my work, it's like, they're not that serious. They're not making an offer on this house. They want to see it because they want to kind of gauge a few things and whatnot. But, people that actually want to buy, they're urgently looking. So don't, just because you get an offer in the first 2 days, don't think. Now, if you get like 5 offers, you underpriced your house. You know what I mean? But like if you get an offer, like that is not underpriced. That's just like you have a buyer that's very interested in it.
Yeah. And if you get 5 offers, maybe you didn't underprice it, but you priced it right. You priced it correctly, positioned well within the market, and you did a good job.
Yeah, and you're going to get a bidding war, right? And so there you go, right? Or you'll have your option of, what offer you want to take. But yeah, just because it sells right away. I mean, that's because there's this weird, like you said, 3 to 4 weeks is stale. So selling in week 1, if you think, I didn't price it too aggressively, it's like, well, how many more weeks? Like, there's just this, it's like you said, it used to be this long line of like 1 week to 6 months, but now it's like 1 week to a month and a half. And I think as time goes on, at least my buyers are starting to wrap their head around that. Like when things first started to get stretched, I remember I had a buyer be like, this has been listed for 22 days. Do you think there's something wrong with it? Like, I want to go see it. But I'm like, 22 days, that's like nothing. But, everything at the time was selling in like a day, like 1 year previously. So, but now I think buyers are kind of wrapping their head around, like even for me, like I'm not having us make really aggressive offers until 45 to 60 days. Like I think people are wrapping their head around a little bit longer, but like 6 months is, like your listing's like dead. Like, you know what I mean? Like you need to do something to revive it. Like if you just keep it the same price, nothing's happening. You need to do a big cut to maybe have a few people that were looking at it be then interested.
Well, and if you're a seller, this is something to keep in mind, like with your agent. Around here we have 4 distinct seasons. So if you took pictures in August or September, the grass is still green. We're now in November. 2 months later, it's full of snow. If somebody's looking through pictures and they see green grass, but it's snowy outside, you think, that's an old listing, even though it's only been on 2 months. The season changed. So it's like we're constantly updating our photos, or good agents are anyways, so people don't get the impression that it's a stale listing. Another thing that an agent can do, and I know this is like an old trick in the book, is switching the front, the icon photo. So if you swap out the front one seasonally, like it's just a glitch in the matrix. You haven't seen it before. It catches your eye. Like there's all of these little things. Granted, is it a magic bullet? No, but if you implement all of these things together for your sellers, that's something that just kind of puts you a cut above the rest, which is good.
Yeah, because a lot of times, people go look at that first photo. I know I do it. If I don't like it, I'm not clicking through the rest of them, So you want the first one to kind of be eye-catching. And, that just plays into the algorithm. Like, you have YouTube now. Like we spend hours, like at Ken McElroy's show, we spend hours on the thumbnail. Like we'll do Ken in a red shirt, Ken in a yellow shirt. We A/B test. If Ken's getting more clicks in the yellow shirt, we use, and it's can be significantly different. The littlest detail like that. Like we literally were talking about that in our meeting last week. And I'm like, I can't believe we're talking about what color shirt Ken has in the thumbnail of the YouTube video, but it makes that big of a difference. So on your pictures, it's like, this is all digital now. So if somebody's going to be interested, if that front picture is not working, we might have to change to a different angle of the home to see if that one then works. And the other thing that's interesting too is, and we just use this strategy on our personal house we just sold, is, it wasn't selling. I have my own, I think Ken priced it too high, but that's just me. But anyways, what we did was we cut the price, and then it still didn't sell for another week, and it had been listed for like 8 months, so a long time. And then we delisted it. And the plan was to then relist it in January, because you have to understand is Zillow is really, important now, because this is what buyers use. And your listing has to be delisted for 30 days, and then it pops new again on Zillow. Now, of course, somebody can look and they can see it was already listed, but the point is all those search parameters, when people put 6 months, our house wasn't even showing up. So then when now are a new listing, it'll pop up. Well, something else that happened is we didn't even get to that point, because when we delisted it, we had a buyer that was waiting for a price decrease even further, and they reached out, are you still selling it? Because when we took it off the market, it pushed them to say, oh crap, we want to get this house. What's happening? Are you renting it? Or, and we told, we said, well, we're thinking about renting it. You know what I mean? And the reason we did that is we want them to buy it, but really we were just delisting it to relist it again in January. But the point is like you when you delist something, it creates some urgency. And if it's been listed for a long time, like over 6 months, definitely if it's over a year, you need that renewal of, oh, this is a new listing again. And so it's so important. It's so, you didn't have to do these things when a lot of people bought back in the day. We're in a whole new, this whole computer algorithm, it's a whole new thing. So you really have to wrap your head around that, because it's really important.
Yeah, for sure. We used to literally have a book, like a PDF with books. You'd print out the MLS sheet and flip through them when clients walked through the office. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Now that never happens. Everything just pops up on Zillow. Either we send them something from the MLS or they send us something from Zillow, and that's just how it happens. And at the end of the day, like, that is the algorithm, so you don't want to let your listing get stale. So you really need to talk to your agent if your place has been sitting and say, why don't we pull this off for 30 days? I know we're not going to get any offers, but at the same time, we haven't had any offers for 10 months, and let it be a new listing again, and let it, but when you do that, you need to price it right. So if you're going to do that and then keep the price the same, don't even waste your time. You have to then be willing to say, okay, why isn't it selling? What's the actual market price? And then do the price cut at the same time as the new listing. Because if you just do the new listing, you're just taking off the market for 30 days for no reason, basically.
Yeah. And it's crazy that you're sold when it delisted. It reminded me, I had clients, same thing. We were going to take it off the market for the winter. And so we did. We took it off the market, and then, I had it withheld. So if our brokerage still had buyers that were looking, we could still show it, but it just wasn't being actively marketed. And we had somebody that reached out that had saw it when it was listed and said, hey, like, are your sellers still selling? What's going on with that? My buyer really wants to make an offer now. And it was a month after they had looked at it. We ended up, they made an offer. We got under contract and we're selling it, all while it was technically, off the market. It was withheld. So it's interesting how that can play into buyer psychology.
100%. Yeah, I had another deal this year, exactly the same thing. Took it off because she's like, it's not selling, I'm going to rent it. And that person's like, wait, what's happening? What's happening? And at the time, she really was renting it. I'm like, she's going to rent it. They're like, well, let me walk through and just see it first. And they ended up buying it. So
yeah,
awesome.
Crazy.
Well, we will see you guys next week. You can always follow us on Instagram. I'm Danille's Story, and Jerry will put that in the show notes. And Tara, what is your handle?
Tara Onken.
Awesome. It'll be below. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.